In this lecture, I am going to show you how to enable HTTPS on server and how can client consume using HTTPS. We'll see one-way SSL, two-way SSL. So firstly, I want to actually make the server to use HTTPS. Let us see step 1. So what I need according to our earlier discussion, if I want to secure only server right now. So this is my server application. My server needs to be told where is the key store. I need to generate a JKS file. Okay. .jks which contains the alias, private key, public certificate. I need to generate such a file with one entry and I need to configure my server. Hey, this is the JKS file which is containing the key information. Then whenever a client starts HTTPS, it will be able to give the certificate and it will happen. So how to generate a key store? If you have Java installed on your machine, in your JDK bin, there is a tool called as key tool. So we can use a tool provided by JDK itself, key tool to generate. So what are the commands? Here I have configured the commands. So this is the command I'll explain you. So firstly what I will do is I'll go to a directory in my command prompt. Okay. Now I will execute this. What is the command? Key tool. So here see the command key tool -gen key. That means I am telling it to generate a key. And what is the alias? I can give anything. I gave my alias, right? And I want to generate a key store. Key store file name is server keystore.jks. And what is the store type? JKS file. We can use PKCS12 also. But here I am telling key store type is JKS. Key password. That means for reading an entry from this key store for a particular alias, there will be one password. Key store, key password. And there will be one password for reading the whole store. Key store password. There will be two passwords. One is for alias. If there are 10 aliases, 10 records, 10 key passwords. But one password at the file level, store password. So here if you see, that's what I was doing. Key password I gave something as password, store password, and key algorithm to be used is RSA. So this is the command. If I press enter, it will ask me for some details. What is my first name and last name? I'll give server. What is the name of organization unit? Server organization unit OU. Server org. City Bangalore, Karnataka, India. So it's asking, is this correct? Yes. Then it will ask me, then it will generate a JKS file, server keystore.jks. If you open this, there will be some junk value which you don't understand. So JKS file is generated right now. So this is for server key store. Similarly, what I can do is I can create client key store. As I told you, if I want two-way SSL, then only it is required. Client key store. So if you see this diagram here, client key store will contain the public and private key information about these things. So you can also generate client key store using this command, right? So if you want to note down the commands, you can pause the video and see the commands and you can try out. There is no lab documentation provided for this. You can pause the video and see these commands and copy paste. Okay. So this will generate two key stores, client key store and server key store files. Now I want to export the certificate. The key stores will contain the certificate, right? Key store, if you see, it will contain as I told you, public certificate, private key, all. So I want to export the certificate. How to export the certificate? Key tool dash export cert. Export certificate for which alias? There might be a lot of aliases in this JKS file, right? For which alias you want the certificate? You are telling that. And from which key store? This is like from this key store. Read it and export it a file called server.cer. And for reading from this JKS file, we need the store password. We are giving it, right? So let me execute this one so that I can get the server certificate. So right now I have only one file right now, server keystore.jks. Again, I'm going to command line and I'm executing this. So certificate is stored here. Here I got the server certificate. If I double click on it, it is saying issued to server, issued by server. Hey, this is a self-signed certificate. This certificate is not having CA root and is not trusted. So it is a self-signed certificate. I am generating the certificate for myself, right? So it is not a trusted certificate. It is not signed by a CA right now. Later I'll show you how to generate a certificate signed by somebody else. But right now this is an untrusted certificate, and if I go to details, it can show me the details whatever I gave: server name, common name, organization, unit, organization, location, state, country, etc. Right? So certificate is containing the details. So I exported the certificate. Now this is the command to export the client certificate from the client key store, right? And so now I have server certificate, client certificate in these files, server cert and client cert. Then what? These certificates have to be imported to trust store, right? So here is a command, key tool import cert into which key store? This will be created, server trust store.js. Which file has to be imported? This is the file, and with what alias? My client. And for this JKS file also I needed store password, right? And you can just remove this as of now. Okay. So this command will import the certificate into a server trust store. So what am I doing? I am importing client certificate to server trust store and server certificate to client trust store, right? So I have already executed these commands, and I have copied client key store, client trust store, server key store, server trust store, everything here. Okay. Now what I want to do is, in Mule I want to show you how to enable HTTPS. Simple. What I have to do is, this is my simple flow where I have a HTTP listener, and set payload is just configured to set the payload as hello. That's all. Let me just show you. Okay, and here I have HTTP listener. Here it is important right now. Here in this HTTP listener config, what I have done is, I have selected the protocol as HTTPS. The default is HTTP. I selected HTTPS. But if I select HTTPS, I have to configure TLS also. TLS is a place where we configure the key store and trust store. Right now what I want is, I just wanted my server to support HTTPS. So I don't need to configure trust store, only key store needs to be configured. Here I gave the details. The store type is JKS, path server store.jks here in my src main resources, alias is server, password. This is key password and this is store password. Both I gave. That's all. On my server, I configured HTTPS, and for my server, I told where is the key store, so that whenever a client makes a HTTP request, it will check in the key store using the alias, get the public certificate and give it. That's all. Very simple. Now let me show you by running this. application. Simply I will show you how HTTPS is working. I'll run this project. So what I'll do is I'll close the browser and open again. Okay, so let me wait until this application is starting. So the application got deployed. Now let me give a HTTPS request for the first time. https://localhost:8081/ I gave test. So here it is saying your connection is not private. Actually, this certificate, whatever is now given by my server, is not a signed certificate, right? So it's giving, hey, it is not secure. So if I want to see certificate, you can click on this here, and if you want to see certificate details, if I double click, here it is showing certificate information, right? So what I want to do is, okay, I know that this is not a certificate signed by a CA. I can go to advanced, proceed. So then it will go and hit, because right now in my browser that certificate of server is not there in its trust store, right? So it is not trusting that certificate. So that's why it showed the warning, and once I said proceed, I got the response. So here in this case, the browser has done the SSL handshake behind the scenes and it has got it. Now what I want is, I want to write a client, a separate client application and consume it, right? So here normally client will be a separate application. Only for demonstration I am showing it. So on client side, what do I need in this case? I need to configure a trust store. I am configuring Oneway SSL right now. Only client will validate the server certificate. So client should have a trust store configured, and in this trust store the public key of server should be imported. So I already have shown you the comments on how to import a server certificate into client trust store, right? So I already have the trust store here, client trust store. I'll show you how to configure. So this is my HTTP request component. Let me just click on this, yeah. And if I edit this, here I configured the protocol as HTTPS. Then if I come down, here I have configured the details about the client trust store, and this is store password. So do you think that key store is required right now? Not required. So what I will do is I'll go to XML and comment out the key store. Here you can see only trust store is what I want. So I'm commenting it out, right? So that's all. Here what I did is I configured the request component to use HTTPS. So if it needs to use HTTPS, we need to point it, we need to tell that the protocol to be used is HTTPS, and we need to configure the trust store. That's all we need to do. Then in this, what I'm doing, actually here I have a listener which is listening at in this case 8082, and the path is /client test. So whenever I give 8082/client test, it is making a request to HTTPS request to server, and whatever is coming from there it is giving me, right? So let me stop and start the server once. It started. Now let me give a request to 8082, right? This is HTTP for client, localhost 8082/client test. So I should get same response, but internally our client application is using HTTPS to communicate. Let us see. Yeah, I got hello, same response whatever the server has returned. Now in this case, I configured only the trust store for the client. Now, if I want to configure two-way SSL, what I need to do? So if I need to configure two-way SSL, what server, whenever client makes a HTTPS request, if I have enabled two-way SSL, server should first request, give me your certificate, right? So client should know where is its key store, where it has the entries. So client will send its certificate. Server should be able to verify the certificate from its trust store. So now I need to configure trust store of the server also and tell it. Once this verification is done, server will send the certificate. Now this server certificate has to be verified from the client's trust store. So if you want two-way SSL where server should also verify the certificate of client and client should verify the certificate of server, you need to configure both sides, the trust store and key store. Now coming to my server configuration here, right? In the global element here, if I click on this edit. So now what I have to do here, in the TLS section, I need to give the trust store information for server. So here I already have server trust store.jks, server trust store.jks, and the password I gave as password only. Type is jks. Okay. So on server side, I gave the information about trust store, server trust store.jks, right? And coming to the client side, I need to configure with the key store related information here. In the request, I will edit this configuration. Here I need to give the information about client key store. So I'll select jks, path is client key store.jks, alias is client, password and password. So I gave the details, right? Now let us see the funny thing, whether we will get the response or not. So let me see the XML ones, whether I configured with correct names or not. So here the name of the file, client truststore.jks, password is password. Key store, client key store.jks. Yes, everything looks fine. Now let me stop and start it. So it started. Now let me give a refresh here. Same thing. Now 2way SSL is enabled and I am expecting it to work, but let's see if it works or not. Still waiting for response here. Got it. Actually, I was expecting that this will fail, but this didn't fail because I have done one small thing. I want you to understand a small configuration, because when you follow this commands and generate the JKS files and certificates, trust stores and all, this will definitely fail if you just follow these instructions and do it. So I have this JKS files, but I have done a small extra thing which I have not shown you till now. while generating this. Because of that, I got the response, right? So let me tell you, the thing is, if you generate the JKS files and certificates using these commands, right? These certificates which were exported and here imported are self-signed certificates, right? So they are not signed by a CA. They are not signed by anyone else. They are self-signed. So here, whenever we are configuring the trust store, there is one setting which I want you to observe. Let me go to server side first. Here in the server side, if I edit this, wherever I was configuring trust store, here I have configured trust store. Here there is something called as insecure. It is not selected, right? By default it is not selected. What does it mean? The documentation of Mulesoft also was not clear about this. I had to struggle a lot to identify the root cause. So I want you to understand this. Here, insecure. So let me tell you what is the meaning of insecure. If I configure insecure, insecure is equals to true. If I configure that, what will happen? Let me tell you. Sorry, insecure is equals to false. If I configure insecure is equals to false means what? Secure, right? So whenever client makes a request, what the server is doing, if I have enabled two-way SSL, server will ask, hey, first give me your certificate. Okay, client will give the certificate. Whatever certificate is given by client certificate, is it signed by some side CA? No, it is self-signed certificate, right? So if insecure is equals to false, that means it is nothing but secure equals to true, right? So we are telling the server, hey, verify whether this certificate is a signed certificate, signed by a CA or not, right? So by default, what is the value of insecure? By default, it is not selected, right? That means it is false. So if insecure is equals to false, that means secure is equals to true. That means by default, if I configure trust store, I am asking my server to validate whether this certificate is a signed certificate or not, right? But if you have generated using these commands, using key tool and all, the certificate is a self-signed certificate. So this will fail, right? So this will give an error. So if I want to make it, if you want to make it work using these commands only, if you want to make it work using these commands, what you can do is you can select this insecure is equals to true. That means, hey, let it be insecure. We don't want to verify whether certificate is really signed or not. If I get a certificate and if it is there in my trust store, it's okay, right? So we have to select this, then it will start working. But in dev environment, what we want, we don't want a signed certificate. So in dev environment, if I follow these commands and if I select this, insecure equals to true, it's okay in a dev environment. But in production, if my server is getting a certificate, it is good to verify whether the certificate is signed by a CA or not in production, right? So in production, we need the certificate should be signed by a CA. But again, I don't want to spend for getting my certificate signed from a CA, right? There is a tool called as I have installed Keystore Explorer. This is a tool called as Keystore Explorer, by using which you can actually simulate a signing request and sign. You can create a root CA certificate and sign using a certificate. I'm going to show you how to use this Key Store Explorer to actually generate a certificate and simulate that this certificate is signed by some other certifying authority. Okay, I'll show you it in your next. But right now you understood how to configure one-way SSL and two-way SSL. What all I need right now is I want it to be insecure. That means I want my server to verify that this certificate is actually signed by a CA. So that I will tell you in next video. See you in next video.